Blackhorse Mitchell, good to have you here. You came a long way. You usually live on the Navajo reservation in Shiprock. I know there's a tradition with you people that you introduce yourself with the entirety of your family and clan affiliations, so I would kindly ask you to do that in your own language.
Okay. Yat do kredina sudden nida ade chinat abe benia jan tanzga do I ahoyende jogala bilda bikeda yedo de chinda alsko konde kwen nakadina do alts isgo gilcho di al nlenigi do ben yana nanige shden nid nalt sosal yegi khadishla kwina khada shi 1967 hi khata itan alt sos khadishla ko den nede yoltra jonde eben nashden kita ben nache ya hadan sogar ja die de Kotike has angebe kai idol left all ja stage bitte no stage play the no jogt au ich dalt so sie hat der leher eben je nan ja jonde equador left the no eben jesgat nati.
Okay, I thank you. So language has played an enormous part in your life, and we will talk about that. You are now a professor. You have been given the title of professor for Navajo language and Navajo cultural studies, which you teach to teachers. You train teachers now, but you have been a teacher for many, many years, and we'll come to talk to that. I want to just briefly ask you, why is it so important in your tribe to introduce yourself with your clan?
It's a culture. It's a way of life. Usually, if I meet another Navajo, some Navajo I run across, if they say I'm at the Ne, the first thing that's going to happen is I would be asking, what clan are you and where do you come from? And usually, if they happen to be my kind of clan, I come from a clown clan, and then if they say I'm a clown clan, then we will hug each other and say, dear brother or dear sister, it's good to meet you here. And it's a way of controlling the young or generations to generations. And that's the reason why we ask. And this is what I also teach the college I'm working for. That's their mission statement, that we should always teach something called ke, means clan systems.
Just to make that clear, especially in history, in the old times, it prohibited the mixing of DNA, and by that it kept the clan, the tribe, healthy.
Yes.
So people in Europe, the rest of the world, are under the impression that there's like the Indians, the native people of America, and that's like, and they have this vision of mostly people with feathers. But that is not so. There's not only one tribe or one kind of tribe. Please talk a little bit about where the Navajos apparently come from, and how their relationship is with other tribes, and maybe a little bit how many other tribes there are.
In the United States, there's about 563 over that many different Native Americans, and each one of them had a way of life. And it just happens to be that my tribe is the biggest of the tribe in the United States, and that's the Ne, and that's where I come from. And I think in 1976, I was listening to a professor. Her name is Dr. Elavina Perkins. she was explaining where Navajos, according to anthropology, where they come from. So she said that we're actually speaking a dialect or a language of Athabascan tribe. And she was saying that we come from the north. And then all of a sudden she says that we speak an Apachean language. So she put every Apachean in a group. In an Apache group, there's, I think, 5 different groups, a Jicarilla and also a Chiricahua and Santa Carlos and Mescaleria, and there's a Lipan. She circled the Lipan. She said, now let's look at the largest tribe, and Navajo was on the side. Navajo is the largest against the smallest of Apache-speaking language. And there's a Lipan Apache at that time. She said there was only 9 left. I don't know up to date. Maybe they extinct. Maybe it's got a 0 mark. And we're growing. Navajos are growing.
You were talking to me some years ago about the way the Navajo tribe, which used to be semi-nomadic, herders, at least the last few hundred years, and how they were relating to the Pueblos. Like, talk a little bit about that, how the roaming tribe, so to speak, related to the Pueblos, because let me mention, I think that the Clown clan, as far as I remember, is actually originally a Pueblo clan.
That's very interesting because I've been teaching Navajo language for 31 years in a school setting. And I love teaching because teaching my language and teaching students how to read and write in Navajo, I realized that working with students is interesting because they have questions that I would never think of. So one of them came up with a question, where does this language come from? And it got me curious because I couldn't answer immediately. I was in one of the Pueblo tribes. There's 19 Pueblo tribes in the Southwest. And I was at Santo Domingo, and I was listening to their conversation. And they keep coming out with this T and an S with a glottal like that. Then you say tsk, 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 tsk. That's how you say tsk. That's how you say tsk. They were talking, every time they say something, the tsk comes up. Tsk, 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 tsk. So I was sitting at the long table and I was repeating tsk, knowing that in my language, we have a TS glottal, and they kind of indicate to me that this is an alphabet that comes from one of these tribes, and it happens to be Santo Domingo. And then I thought about the clan. They only have 2 clans. One is a squash, and the other is a turquoise clan. We have in the Navajo clan system a squash clan, Naize. The Na is I would say, Santo Domingo clan. Since studying these dialect and the sound, a lot of the language that we speak has this dialect tse, tse in it. And then I was at Jemez, Pueblo, and these older men were teasing each other. They were laughing, and I was listening to them, and they were saying "Sara ne," and they were touching each other, and they were laughing. So I asked one of the Jemez young person, a lady, said, "What does Sara ne mean?" And she laughed and she said, "It means in-law. They're just teasing my in-law." And then I realized Navajos had the same sound, but we had a sh in it. We say shadane to mean my in-law, but in the Hamish language they say sadane. And then I realized we do have a Hamish Pueblo, which is Salt Clan. That's my father's side of the clan. So in this case, that tells me that within 76 and over Navajo people, Navajos are not just some Navajo out of the blues. It's just that it tells me we have been one of these Pueblo clans in our lives. And then I've studied my own clan. I asked what is a Yei, the Ne, Tachi, ne? Because there's a lot of story that people talk about. Yei is actually a clown. It's something kind of scary, like, you know, how clowns paint themselves. And then I've learned, okay, a clown clan is one of those stripes like zebra, and those are what we call clowns. So I figured my great-great-grandmother must have come from a Pueblo. So in other words, that kind of makes me think I am a clown clan, and that's where I come from. I kind of disagree with anthropologists when they said Navajos came from the north and they're Athabascan. But in my case, I feel like no. I think somewhere that there is a wrong information. If the Pueblos were here first in the Southwest, then we're one of those clans descended.
Maybe it turns out that everything is a mixture, so that some people, as we talked about, came down from the north, they settled there, they mixed with the other people came from the south.
Yes.
Let's locate the Navajo reservation. The Navajo reservation, Dineta, the land of the Diné, is now basically, it's in 4 states of the US. It's in Colorado, it's in Utah, it's in Arizona and New Mexico, with the largest parts being in Arizona and New Mexico. When we chat with each other and when I'm over there to visit you and we travel around, you comment a lot about how things were culturally and how they are now in contemporary culture and how they have changed. And recently you talked to me about a documentary that you have seen about the Long Walk. Mm-hmm. And I would like you to briefly explain what the Long Walk is and then what you noticed in the documentary, and then we'll talk about those cultural differences.
I read a lot of history on the Long Walk. In the Long Walk, Navajos always talk about how horrible it was when the Navajos were rounded out by Kit Carson and then marching them to Fort Sumner, New Mexico. A lot of times, whoever made the documentaries, it bothers me because the people that are being marched would be huge, they're fat, or they're wearing like the Kaibat moccasin, which is American, the white man made moccasins, and it bothered me because when I heard it from my great-grandmother's side of the story, she says it was horrible. A lot of Navajo were marched to Fort Sumner's with hardly enough clothing. They were skinny, they were starving, they didn't have enough to eat, and they even, what the soldiers did was they took pregnant women where, like, if they're so tired they can't march, they just took them over the hill and shot them. And that's the part I don't really like to hear. And the thing about it is, like, when Navajos at that time, when the old men or the old ladies got tired and they can't walk anymore, they just shot them like they would do to animal with a disease. And that was the horribleness that Navajos went through. I can see what it was like. And some of the Navajos that were, somehow they were taken in by other pueblos at the time. And then some children were even confiscated by Mexicans. And the thing that kind of bothered me is, instead of saving the poor Navajo child, they sold them to Mexico. And somebody told me there's some Navajos living in Spain. So I gathered they've been sold, and for some reason, they end up in Spain, and they somewhere. But it happened. But I'm just wondering about when I hear anything that happens in the world, like in my state, when something happens in New York, like the now thing is when there's a shooting in these schools, and it's like horrible, horrible. But what the American people at that time did to the Indians, how come they never felt sorry for it? And we're just sitting here as the new generation. I'm from the 40s, but I just get to think about how will I confront my students. It's just like seeing when you took me to Vienna to see students within this great session that you held about on Holocaust, and the students were there. And what impressed me was that the students, the high school students, all of them were talking their language. They understood the language that was spoken by these elders. And I'm kind of like disappointed when a lot of my students couldn't talk fluent Navajo. That's what I'm saying. It's just that how can that I'm just looking at the difference in America, and then here I am in Vienna listening to these high school students speak their language. And if Navajo kids can talk like that, wouldn't it be wonderful? It's just my thinking.
And you're working hard for that. Thank you. Let's talk a little bit about those differences that have happened over time, because I know that you are of the opinion that once your people lose their language and lose their crafts and lose their cultural traditions, that they basically will disappear. So let's just mention also that at the time of the Long Walk, the whole population of the Navajo people was reduced to something of a few thousand. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so they were almost extinguished, like many other tribes as well. And now it's around 300,000. So within barely 100 years, you have been very busy populating up. So it's very popular to have kids. Kids are very beloved on the reservation. That's always something that I find very pleasant. So how has it changed? You say your great-grandmother was on the Long Walk, so she really remembered how the history went down. How was it different in a family? What would be like a traditional Navajo family situation as opposed to now?
Before the Long Walk, it seems like we know how to keep ourselves underweight. Navajos were slim. But taking a long walk in the 1863 on to 1868, in that 4 years, the learning of a new way of life was how to make fried bread, how to make fried potatoes using excessive amount of grease. It was good, but Navajos came back with a different taste. We're not like eating off what Earth has to provide. We're not at that stage anymore. We're eating a lot of junk food. I've seen a grandmother buy 12 packs of sodas, and she could hardly walk. And for some reason, it's an addiction when you drink those sweet stuff. In a lot of schools, as I remember, Red Mesa High School decided to remove the Coke machine and the chip machine. They wanted to sell some healthy food. And I don't know whether it did good, but I find that I was eating at a cafeteria. Those food are packaged. And again, they're a couple, maybe months old. It's kind of like they're sealed, and once you break the seal, something happens to the food. But I still feel like they're trying to give us something that would kind of like, it's not healthy, in other words. And I know we do have programs on Navajo Nation. We have programs that teach us nutrition, how to eat, how much to eat, and they do have a program where they say you can't have a big tortilla this big. You only need like maybe a hand size of a tortilla, and even to eat a meat, a hamburger should be maybe almost the size of the palm of your hands, and they try to teach us that, and yet for some reason I think the program could not reach the whole tribe. How do you reach the whole tribe since the tribe has grown and some of the Navajo people are residing out of the Navajo Nation? Some of them are in California, and I find that I have some nephews living in Hawaii. They're my clan, but one day their mother brought the boys back to Navajo land, which is Shiprock, and we were eating, and then they couldn't eat mutton. They couldn't eat what we eat. They said they were craving for fish. So they took them to a Safeway store. They said, that's no fish. It doesn't have the taste. They rather go back to Hawaii, and then fish there is what they want. And then one of my aunt went to see her grandkids, and they said all the grandkids did is they go out and surf, and they think they're Polynesian. They no longer think of being our clan. So that tells me that Navajos are all over.
We must mention here that, of course, traditionally Navajos are not supposed to eat fish. Mm-hmm. They live in the desert, so there is no. Well, there could be in the mountains, but traditionally you're not supposed to eat fish at all. You were mentioning families. And you were mentioning in a few days ago when we were talking how you noticed that the family structures are breaking up and that there are so many young kids are being treated in a sad way, I would say. Please elaborate a little bit on that. What was traditionally the situation? What is the situation now in the family?
I'm looking at the Western concept of education. And I feel like to go that route, it's what the white man wanted to do. It's what the white man wanted to do to the Indians. Is break them up, break up the structure like.
But you were saying that there's a lot of behavioral and a lot of trouble with the young people. So what troubles the young people? What is the situation with the families?
I would think the families are too busy working. And most of the kids, they're by themselves. And it's not like the long ago 40s, 1940s and up to 1950, Usually the mother is at home consistently, being like the kind of mother that they try to discipline their kids. But now it seems like the parents are a working parent or too much a breakup in the family. Sometimes when I was teaching, this is where I saw it. Teaching in a high school, a lot of times I found that there's a lot of, I would say, parent separation, and students are kind of like just didn't know which way to turn or don't know, like no support. Sometimes that I feel like it's the kid. Some kids take it hard when parents split, when they get a divorce or the parents no longer are together. Seems like that would be most of the problem. And then sometimes I find students coming into my class and they're either both parents are drinking and they're not paying much attention to students or the child, and it seems that that's what's ruining, I would say, a lot of family life, and that's where the problem is. And we're not telling our kids that what not to do. We're not teaching our young to say respect Mother Earth. They just throw trash all over, and we're just not careful. And I've heard someone that went to Japan and said in Japan, you should see their highway, clean highway, but you should see the highway that I travel on each morning to work. Trash, messy, potholes, with somehow it says that nobody pays attention to that. And so that's today. And then I find technology is another thing. I've seen people just cruise or they drive by and they have a cell phone, they're laughing, and they're not even looking where they're going or you're coming. They just pay more attention to cell phone or they be texting. We got into this technology thing. It's good. I love it. And I do have a cell phone. It's good when I'm herding sheep way out there in the middle of nowhere, and sometimes my sister would call me and say, you have someone parked at your hogan, they need your services, do you want me to come over on my ATV and look after the sheep while you take care of these folks that are waiting for you? And that's where I feel like technology is good, but you got to learn to know when to use it and not to be driving and texting.
You were just mentioning that you receive a phone call whilst sheep herding, and that Auntie Aurelia will tell you there are people waiting for your services. Mm-hmm. Now, we haven't mentioned that. What services would that be?
Well, I do Winway. I do ceremonies. I do sand paintings. And sometimes people stop by the house or they hear about, they go to somebody else, they go to other, I would say, diagnostician, and then sometimes they tell their patient, you need a Winway. And that's when somebody would say, where do you find a Winway singer? And people usually say, oh, the Belinkte Genilai lives over there. And so that's how they end up at my house, and they'd be waiting to have me do a Winway ceremony, like sand painting, depending on which one. And that's what I do.
Of course, the ceremonial life of Navajo is a whole universe, and we will probably do a very special program on that, you and I, in the future, and show people here a little bit about this, because it is actually an entirely independent way of medicine, psychological, but also practical herbology. It is a fantastic science, I would say, and a totally different worldview, and it works. About the difference in culture, there was one last topic that I wanted to touch on in this. We're talking a lot about the people that we love, that we care for, and we see that a lot of those people are getting old. They're getting on in life. How was it traditionally? What would happen? How would one treat old people, and what is happening now? Because there are such big differences in that. Starting, for example, that people would not be buried like they're being buried now. And now there's Navajos in old people's homes. We know them personally. So talk a little bit about the difference of how one would age in the past and how one does it now.
The person that age, a hogan was provided for them. Just a couple yards away from the main, I would say, hogan of the household. And that's where the older person, the elderly, is fed over there and is paid attention over in another hogan. And usually one of the grandchildren would go over there and check on the grandfather or the grandmother. That was the way it was. But of course, with the new era, in terms of, let's say, the American view is like you have to put the elder in an elderly home. You have to have them there. My brother had a health problem, and my niece is a working lady, and she doesn't have time to look after her father. And it seems like the best way to do it was put him in an elderly nursing home. And I feel disappointed, but what can you do? And I'm working. I could be there to help my poor brother, but the thing is, I'm a single person, and we just gotten older too, and it's kind of rough. But I did at one time put a word in at the local meeting that where I have my grazing right is in Shiprock. The reason why I wanted that land to be used was to build a big nursing home, so we don't have to send our elders somewhere else in another town where I feel like they don't belong there. They belong right where the Navajo people are. I wish they could put the biggest, I would say, elderly home, nursing home right near Shiprock. And I believe in that, but it's just that the people had to be convinced. And I'm not a political person. I don't know how to lie. I like to be straightforward and really mean business, but I still think there should be an elderly home right where I live next.
Let me add here that you told me a long time ago that originally, because there are 4 mountains, which are actually the boundaries of the Navajo land, that originally people were not really traveling beyond that because they would get sick. So actually still the traditional families bury the umbilical cord after the birth at the birthplace. So there is a very deep tie to the land. You mentioned that you are working every day, and are you going great distances to do that? That's very spread out. You have to drive a long time, and you are now a professor at Dine College, and you are teaching teachers or people who are becoming young learners in Navajo, and also you're also teaching history and cultural studies. And apart from being a teacher, your whole life, you're also an accomplished artist and craftsman. And I just wanted to ask you, you do pottery, you sew fantastic moccasins, you do all kinds of things like that. Why do you do it, and why do you think those crafts are valuable and should be passed on to the young as well? What's it about those?
Basically, a lot of times I find a lot of my colleagues would tell me I get lonely. They need people. But for me, I was brought up in a sense of my grandmother. Long ago, she did say, you got to know something. And what she meant was she was a weaver. She wove. And she said that not specifically that I was going to learn, I should learn to weave. She was telling me about that. She said, you should know how to make pottery. You should learn how to make moccasins. And someday, you might be working and you get fired. And if that ever should happen, you got to learn to survive. The survival part is you have to know some other art, that other craft, so that you could always help yourself. And that way, she says, you won't be lonely. If your old lady leaves you, you won't be running around crying to your neighbor or to your poor sister saying, I got dumped. So I want you to bring the lady back for me. Instead of saying that, let it be. She can have fun somewhere else. If your heart is strong enough, you'll be sitting there, maybe molding a clay, making something to keep you busy. That's your companion. And then either you're making a pottery or you're working on a pair of moccasins to keep you at home. He says that's where home is, and you should never be lonely. You got a lot of things to work on, like to know how to do basketry. So I meant ceremonial basketry. She says that's something to know that you should always have, and that's what I do.
Let us say here that in the older days, the Navajo were hunter-gatherers, and then the sheep came, and then they became fantastic sheep herders. But now the value is in education.
Yes.
Actually, we are here. We've been knowing each other now for almost 20 years, and I met you through another person, another teacher, Shawnee, writer, poet, Barney Bush, who said to me at that time, you have to meet Blackhorse Mitchell. He's done something very important. He's written the first native autobiography. So you did that when you were 17 years old, on the behest of your teacher who said, write your story, and you went home and you actually wrote a book. That book, by the title of Miracle Hill, became very famous at its time because of the fact that you were so young, you were still not really apt in the English language. You were just starting out. You learned English late. You grew up speaking Navajo only on the Mesa. Now, this book has been out now since the late 50s. It's now in the second publishing and is in reprint again. And the reason why I'm talking about it is that we've been working on the stage version, and I want you to tell me, why is it important for you, or what do you think is the value of Miracle Hill today?
The story begins with the way a Navajo thinks, a Navajo thinking. And I started writing that book based on how I would think using, and I realized the term that they use was poetic. It's not English grammar. It's kind of like a backward kind of wording, but the way I thought about it was, I'm sure that my teacher at the time saw that and said, keep on writing, finish it. And then if you read Miracle Hill, it's not a wonderful book, but it should show any reader, if there's a good reader, how an Indian faces the second language. And when you get to halfway of that book, the grammar straightens out. And by the time you're finishing reading, the grammar is like it's the way it's supposed to be. And in that book, I fought so hard with my instructor, and we fought over words. The one word that I could give you in there that I got away with is like sheeps. My teacher said, you don't say sheeps, because sheep is just the word sheep. And then I got back at my instructor and argued. I said, you just got through telling me when there's more than one, you add an S. So what you asking me about how many sheeps I have, because there's more than one sheep, I have lots of sheeps. So we fought over the grammar structure, and I've been trying to tell, well, English teachers, what are you teaching these Indian kids? You're teaching them how to speak English, but there's something wrong with your English. Why do you say sheep rather than sheeps? That's what I was fighting for, and I had it my way. The lady who also edited Miracle Hill, she made a typographical error in the name. Because the character I had in there is Bronco, and she made a typographical error and an E fell after the N. So she says, we'll leave it the way it is. It sounds so authentic. Now the teacher got inspired by something, and I said, no, I didn't put that, you did. So we fought for years over that word, but it stayed as Bernacle. But it's not Bernacle, it was supposed to be Bronco. I was named after a horse. My name that I was given at birth was Barney. Barney was a trader's horse that was half Arabian and half quarter, and the trader didn't know what to do with it. The trader and my great-grandfather, they were like brothers for some reason. A white man and this old man, they were like brothers. On my grandfather's birthday, I guess he ended up at that trading post, and he doesn't know his birthday, but on a card somewhere, it has his birthday on there. And so Mr. Bond, I guess, said, my friend, it's your birthday, and I decided that I have a birthday gift for you. And my grandfather didn't know what the birthday gift was. I took him out to the back corral, and there was a black horse. And that was his birthday gift. That's the horse that he brought back. It was a mare. And it had a little one. When that little one was born, and the horse's name was Barney. So when the little colt was born, my grandfather, I guess I was born, and my grandfather said, well, just call him Barney. When I was riding, I decided not to say Barney. I wanted to play a third person, and so I decided to use Bronco as a horse. And that's the reason why. And then mistake of an E fell in there, and we fought. Me and my teacher fought over that for years, and we didn't make friends.
Thank you for enlightening us. Let me end with this question. You have been traveling across the Atlantic from the Navajo Reservation here to Central Europe several times now. And how do you see the perception of European people, of native people, vis-a-vis how they are perceived in America? Are there differences? Because people here are very idealistic and they always, they love Indians, so to speak. But then when they see you and you don't have feathers, sometimes they get really disappointed. But how is this relationship between Belagana, the white people, and red people?
The only thing that bothers me is there's America. I don't feel comfortable with American people, but to come to this country is after viewing Winnetube. I just thought about it. So this is how they see Indians. This is what they think this particular Indian. But as I was saying, there's 500 and over Native Americans, and it just happens to be, I'm not sure what Indian is that they projected that film on now. So what I'm looking at is the difference. It's just the cultural difference. And I love the food here, the eating. It's so elegant because you find, in America it's different. They either use too much grease or I'm not sure what it is. But here it's kind of like the food is greaseless. And it's just like they have maybe vegetables, and it's just so set, and it's not overly, it's just right. And it seems like that. I like the food. But and then the people, I wish I spoke the language, and it would be super. If I was speaking Czech or German, I think it would have been much easier. But I don't know how it would be in England. But I always think of England as it's one of these rock and roll things like the Beatles and heavy metal and all of this. That's what I look at, and it seems like I don't belong there. For some reason, I just feel that way. But here, I just feel like it's interesting to know the cultural difference, though.
Ache, thank you for your time.